Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Also, check out Off the Floor. We're going to start the Q&A stage shows on there this week. There's going to be a lot of content that is not available on the podcast feed, not available on Twitter. We're going to give you even more on Off the Floor. So check out the link in our description here, $2.99 per month. You're going to want to be there during the Heat season. Also, check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Includes Better Edge. Use the code 5RSN. It's the number 5RSN. You get $20 to play right away at betteredge.com. You can find the line that you want with no VIG. You can also join all of our contests. We give away shirts and more. Check it out, betteredge.com. Legal in the state of Florida, a social betting marketplace, again, where you can find the line that you want. And now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne.
Yikes. Five on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing rubber frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the flow playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the Five Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at Five Reasons Sports. I got Alex Toledo. You can follow me at Tropical Blanket. We are now, as we're recording this, 1 week away from training camp. 1 week away from Media Day. I'll be flying to the Bahamas. Myself and Timothy Bain will be covering training camp for you there.
The end of the content drought.
Oh my God. Today was the day where we just hit it. And then the Heat came through. Like literally, like today was the day after we've got through, because these guys got eliminated. What was it? Late April. We got through several months making up topics, making up series. And finally today I was like, I don't have anything. I got nothing. I got nothing. When did we start our training camp series? And then all of a sudden, thank you, Heat, they made a move.
Mm-hmm.
They waited until September 24th, or September 23rd, but they made a move. And so we're going to talk about that move today. Before we do, though, some other stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff going on. We haven't really talked about some of the other things that are in store this year. Like, for instance, the Dwayne Wade statue, which is they're going to unveil that, I guess, the game against Detroit. Well, the night before the home game against Detroit. So that's kind of a big deal. And then we knew about this. I know Tim Reynolds reported this first a while ago, but there was more to it, I think, than we expected, which is the Heat are redoing the scoreboard. They're going to be introducing it to the public at the red, white, and pink game. And of course, that's the first scrimmage of the season with proceeds going to charity. They're going to be unveiling it there. We may get a chance to see it beforehand. Who knows? But they needed a scoreboard like renovation badly. Like as someone who traveled around the league, the Heat scoreboard was like obsolete, and video screen was obsolete like a decade ago. So it's good that they were doing something, but it's more than that. So I'll read this out before we get to the other moves. But of course, Heat fans couldn't resist saying, "Oh, there's Jimmy's extension money." One has nothing to do with the other. Okay. just making that clear, okay? And plus, I haven't seen Jimmy mention anything about basketball in 5 months on his Instagram. Seriously, what country is Jimmy coming back for training camp? I'm not quite sure at this point. All right, anyway, Fireball. So this is 2,500 square feet of LED screens, an enhanced scoreboard. Again, this was necessary. 55 million pixels of digital display. Just like the Five Reasons Studios. Space across 4 main displays, 2 rings, and 4 underbelly displays. I guess the tentacles are gone. I never understood that anyway. What was that?
Tentacles.
It was like Medusa. I
never really thought much about it, but you're right. They do kind of look like tentacles. Like, I think having a big friggin' fireball, considering, that's like on the logo, like, I like it. It's a good idea.
Yeah, it was a very good idea. New lighting system. This is my favorite. I will say this is my favorite part of the whole thing. If you've never been to a game, they do this in MSG, LA, and Brooklyn. Those are 3 that I know of. Where it's theater lighting. So like the lights are, instead of on the crowd, they're on the court. And I just think it looks much better. It's just it feels like more of a show. Plus, it'll hide the fact that Heat fans show up at the end of the first quarter. I'm just kidding. Kind of. It dims the stands and brightens the floor to create a theater-style atmosphere. No, actually, they arrived before the first quarter, but they're stuck outside waiting on security for 45 minutes, and then they get in and they got to get their concessions, and they got to see everybody else that they're going to go out with later that night. They're there. They're there. Anyway, so the new lighting system, I'm excited about that. That will be pretty cool, and they won't even catch you and Brady cheering now. And the state of the art audio system.
That's crazy.
Delivers nearly 700,000 watts of powerful sound, 50% more than the previous system. So for our friends like my guy Howard Beck and others, the national reporters who would come into town and like constantly complain about Mike Biamonte, and it wasn't mostly Howard, but I guess
Twice as loud now.
Twice. We're louder now. We're louder. Seriously, for that Tuesday night game against Detroit, like they're gonna be like just that's gonna come down to a clutch shot. There's gonna be just absolutely crazy in there. And also a retractable seating system. Upgrades 2,100 lower bowl seats and creates a more secure pathway to home and road team locker rooms. I don't know what this means. Does this mean they're putting us up in the rafters? Probably. I have a bad feeling about this.
You see, because of our new retractable seat system, we just can't. You got to go up to 400.
Anytime they upgrade the arena, I know we're moving further upstairs. Like that's literally the first thing I thought of. I'm like, okay, we're gonna be over in Bayside, streaming it from the Black Market restaurant. Anyway, by the way, possible sponsorship there. All right, so that's what they're doing, and I think it's good. Like, it has nothing to do with anybody's contract extension or second. You don't pay the second apron to upgrade your lighting system. You just don't. That's not, the league hasn't put that in yet. Unlikely to be earned lighting. I don't know. They haven't put in those kind of incentives. So anyway, that's what they're doing. But the other thing that the Heat did from an on-court perspective in the 7th minute of this podcast is they signed Nassir Little. And I've already got confirmation before the podcast. This does not affect the second apron. Okay. Now you've got Ira, Bobby Marks, Barry, Anthony. Everybody's kind of throwing out what this could be, is not, whatever. It seems like, and again, I might get corrected on this by the time that we finish with the podcast, but it seems like it's a non-guaranteed, it's a standard non-guaranteed contract. That's what it seems like, right? Could you explain it based on what you saw from Bobby? Because I do trust Bobby on these kind of things.
Well, and I think from what I'm reading from Barry, I think they're everybody's saying the same thing, that the Heat will not be crossing into the second apron with this deal, even though it's not an Exhibit 10 training camp invite, which I originally thought it was going to be, since it's so late in the game. Even though he is a guy with, of course, years of NBA experience, it's not an Exhibit 10 training camp deal, which is what guys like Isaiah Stevens and Zion Pullen are. It is a chance to kind of get a look at him. Excuse me, behind the scenes. And like you mentioned, and like what Bobby Marks threw out here, there's a guarantee date, and what he put on his tweet is January 7th. And according to his math, the Heat are currently about 1.6 million below the second apron. And he says that at that guarantee date on January 7th, that cap hit will take off about 1.3 million of that. So there'll be about 0.3 million. I mean, I'm sorry. I just messed myself up there trying to read this tweet. They'll be extremely close to the second apron here, is the point of all this. And they're going to have to make a decision on January 7th.
But it does give them some time. That's the thing. And so it gives them a chance to look at a player. And my bigger point to this, and this is kind of how we're going to delve into this today, it seems like they're taking flyers on higher upside players lately. And the reason, I'll start here. First thing, Nassir Little, for those who are not familiar, was in some places the number 1 high school prospect in the country, going back a bit. And then he was a first-round pick. And so now you've got another guy on the roster like Josh Christopher, who, I mean, let's be honest, was kind of a busted first-round pick. I mean, and we saw Josh Christopher perform in Summer League. We haven't gotten a chance to see Little do that, but I'll give you some of the numbers, and then I know you have the deeper dive metrics on this. Little came into the league at age 19. First season for Portland. He played 48 games in each of his first 2 seasons. First season, averaged 12 minutes. Second season averaged 13 minutes, so not a lot of progress there. He shot 23% from three in his first season, 35% in his second season, but on very low volume. Then the third season, 21-22, he started 23 games for a very bad Portland team. 42 games played in total, 33% from three, 46% overall. He averaged close to 10 points, but again, I don't know how you even read into that. A lot of garbage time stuff. And then next season, also with Portland, averaged 18 minutes, 54 games, 44% from the field, 37% from three on 3 attempts. And then last season, he was purged in all of that Dame stuff, right? And then Ayton ended up with Phoenix. Nassir Little ended up with Phoenix. And, they were kind of cycling through depth the entire season. He averaged 10 minutes, shot 46% from the floor, averaged 3.4 points, started a couple of games. Your assessment of his NBA career thus far, and he's only 24 years old.
Honestly, it's very similar to what you were talking about with Josh Christopher, and it's very similar to what we talked about with RJ Hampton last year. Now, I'm not saying all these guys have the same game, same skill set, any of that, but it's very similar. Like, it's guys who were absolutely top-tier prospects coming out of high school who maybe had, an underwhelming or disappointing season in college for whatever reason, or maybe just not, like, quite as good as expected, right? Because these guys were extremely highly rated prospects. And I think it's just, all of them, it didn't kind of work out at multiple stops. And then the Heat are just kind of giving them a chance. And now it's about, who you think could separate themselves with, I guess, their skill set. Because I feel like at this point, for guys like that, you're trying to make a roster. And I think you got to figure out, like, what is your best skill set? What are your strengths, right? And how can you play into them the most? So like a Nas Little, like he was supposed to be better than this, man. So it's, of course, like I think of a guy like that, and it's like he was very highly touted. So you look at a 6'6" wing that's kind of bulky, right? Not extremely bulky, but has some size to him. 24 years old, like you mentioned, and you already start thinking, he can get better defense out of him, which I think is a reasonable thing, right? Because he has the tools athletically and size-wise. And then on offense, it's just kind of like he's been just about league average shooter on league average volume when he has actually had opportunities and an actual role. But I wouldn't say he was a positive out there. So I think maybe, like the Heat getting a look at him, I like the idea, right? Because maybe you get somebody who is a back-end, roster player who can play when guys are hurt. You're not expecting somebody to come in and be a rotation player for you. But I like these types of swings for them, considering like where they're at, on their cap sheet. So I think him and Josh Christopher, for different reasons, because they're different players, just trying to see if they can kind of play a role and who can do it better. These are guys fighting for their NBA lives, so I'm interested in it. Like you get an athletic wing who you hope can be a two-way player for you, but it's about who can play a role now, I think.
It is. And let's go back through some of the history on this. You mentioned, and we talked about how high touted he was. I'm going through it. So he did slip in the draft. I remember when that happened, that there was a lot of eyebrows raised because he was supposed to go top 15 from what I recall. He went 25th. And then since he's been in the league, he's had a couple of major injuries. He tore a labrum in the left shoulder in 2022. And then late in 2023, he had abdominal surgery. So he's had kind of two major surgeries since then, which limited his progress. I do think this is an interesting approach because typically the Heat with this development program have they've gotten these guys who've fallen through the cracks, but before, sort of the pro level. So in other words, guys who they weren't drafted or so for instance, like a Tyler Johnson is a perfect example, right? Like they identified Tyler Johnson as somebody they wanted. He had a horrible camp at Portsmouth. All right. And they were ecstatic because once he had the horrible camp at Portsmouth, they thought, okay, maybe he's going to slip out of the second round and they were able to get him. That's a different kind of player. Those types of guys that they've gone for in recently is a different type of player than former first round picks that they get kind of after they bust out in a couple of different situations. And that's, again, with Christopher, RJ Hampton, another one that we mentioned.
All
Nassir
of them
Little.
drafted in the 20s after like a disappointing college season.
Right, exactly. They slip at that stage, but that they have these kind of high end possibility. And I will say that look, they did take flyers on some guys during the Big Three era. You know, Greg Oden. There were other circumstances involved with that. He never could get completely healthy. Eddie Curry, I think lost part of the passion to play by the time he got to Miami. So they have taken shots on first rounders before. It's not like the first time they've done it. But this developmental program has not really been about that. You know who was the one guy they took a shot? Dion is a good example of a guy. Yeah. But and it wasn't. He was 2.7 million. Okay, which is what it was. That's
and
what
he had shown way more, to be honest. Like even though he wasn't like a star or anything, he had shown a lot more in Cleveland. Even though it was a bad team, all that, just mission wise, like the Nas Little, Josh Christopher, and RJ. Different extents, of course. Like none of them really had that level of productivity that Dion.
They didn't. And Dion was basically dumped because for J.R. Smith and that team ended up making a run. And then he played reasonably well in OKC, but he was available for $2.7 million. So I like this idea of upside. I'm curious to see how this plays out in terms of how they decide to use it. Because you mentioned if he's going to have a role with the Heat, he's going to have to make threes. I just think we talk about Christopher, we talk about Little, some of these guys, like the way that the Heat offense is structured, that corner three in particular is going to be something they're going to have to knock down. And Little, and Sean Rochester made this point on our Discord, and I recommend everybody subscribe to Off the Floor. That is really, that's the thing. Like if he's going to shoot the 35, even if it's on low volume, if he's going to shoot the 35% plus from three, with some of the other tools that he has, there could be a role for him. And I said the same thing about Christopher, because you're not going to be in a role where you're a primary scorer with this team. You're just not. And I know that sounds crazy when it's a team that struggles to score, but these types of guys, even if they were former first round picks, that's not what they're bringing them in for. I mean, Caleb Martin was a scorer at Nevada, right? Mm-hmm. When they got him, and this feels a little Caleb Martin-ish to me, and that would be the highest upside you could get from this. Caleb was not a first round pick, but Caleb came in right before camp, and then it was like, okay, from the very beginning, you're like, wait a second, this guy looks like a Heat player. He looks like and then we're kind of, maybe he can actually play a little bit this year. And then the more you saw him, you're like, wow, he's a rotation player. He just does all the little things that they need from him. And then there was this offensive growth that I don't think a lot of us saw coming, but it came from him getting into the rotation as a defender, as a plug in the holes type guy. That's what these guys, Christopher and Little, are going to have to prove to them. And then you might see some more of the offensive skill set. I mean, Little has a 30-point game in the NBA. So it's not like he can't score. I just don't know how efficiently he will do it at this stage. And again, he's had some injuries, but you've got now a 5-year track record where he's really struggled to stay in a decent rotation. So moderating expectations here, but I like it as a flyer. I mean, I like them taking a flyer on a guy. If a guy is willing to accept a lesser role, and he took a non-guaranteed contract, apparently. So it means two things, Alex. One, there wasn't a huge market for him, even though we had heard he worked out for four or five teams this past week. But the second thing is, okay, he's willing to sort of, to try to prove himself in this kind of situation. So I have no problem at all with the move.
Yeah, I like it. Like we said, I mean, it's just a chance to get a look at the guy, and maybe there's some upside there for somebody who can, play some minutes if need be. Now, it doesn't mean, play him over some of the young guys that you want to see, but sometimes he do that if they're just really impressed with the guy. I think they can help, the team win now more than one of the young guys. So I don't want to see him like necessarily get minutes over at Keyshawn Johnson, right? Like a guy who you want to see and doesn't have like 5 seasons of differing sample size in the NBA, but at the same time, like you want to fill the end of your roster, considering you were kind of went into the summer strapped for money. So taking these types of swings and Josh Christopher and Nas Little, like I think these are the types of moves they should have been looking at. And look, like you said, it's about playing a role at this point. So it seems simplified, right? Because it's like, oh, just make your open shots. Occasionally attack a closeout if the space is there to attack, because he's obviously like somebody who's pretty athletic. You would like to see him get to the rim at sometimes maybe off of cuts as well, if it's there for him. Do those types of things. We know that he wasn't supposed to be a guy who like ran your offense or anything either. So I feel like it could work out for him, but it's also like if almost all of your shots are going to be from three, there's a lot of variance involved. And I think that's why, like, you look at what he did with Phoenix last season, where he had probably his most inconsistent role. Like you mentioned, it ended up like averaging out to 10 minutes a game when he did play. And next to, playing with all this other offensive talent and the team with a lot of space out there, all that, he had a bad shooting year. There's a lot of three-point shooting variance, and even though he's been kind of league average, which is okay, and other points, I think if you have such a small role, it messes with your rhythm. And you've heard players talk about this forever. Like there's an adjustment period there because you feel like the role's easy, and you can tell yourself, yeah, just shoot threes and play defense. And that's really what you want from him. But even if he thinks he's an okay shooter, like if you just go out there and the very limited time you get, like you can miss a couple and that's it. Like, it just messes up. It just messes you up for the time going forward. I think the thing with Josh Christopher versus Nas Little is he has some more to his game offensively, right? I think he's got some offensive juice there. You saw it in the summer league. Not that I'm expecting him to come in and run things, but I feel like he can add more outside of catch and shoot threes, which are what I'm guessing is going to be what Nas Little does if he ever gets playing time. So I think at this point for Nas, he's got to play his ass off on defense because we know that can get you playing time eventually with the Heat if they really think like you're guarding your yard there and you're doing the right thing off ball, you're making all the second efforts, you're switching, whatever they're asking you to do. And I think it starts there. But after that, it's all about three-point shooting variance for him. Whereas Josh Christopher, I think, he can go to other things if the three isn't falling for him.
Yeah, and then that may be two of the guys we kind of pit together in competition here and that's what I want to get to on the other side of this. Like, is someone in jeopardy around January? Because it seems to me like that could be the case here. Before we do, mention a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. And you're going to hear from them all season long because they're one of the sponsors of our post-game show now. We're going to be doing a segment called Defending the House. We talk about defense a lot, obviously, because the Heat are going to need to be good defensively again this year. We'll give it to the best defensive player on the Heat for that game. It may end up being Bam 82 times, but we'll see. But you got to check them out at the Real Estate Shop. This is Javier Iglesias and Amanda Martin. And what they do is they help buyers and sellers in real estate. They're honest, approachable, smart, and they're nimble and protective of their clients. They service the entire Tri-County area, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties with a proven on-market strategy. The Real Estate Shop sellers earn the most money in the shortest time frame because of their deep understanding of the local market. So you can find them a couple of different ways on Instagram at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor. Again, that's the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. At Real Estate Shop, that's 2 P's and an E, realestateshopfl.com, realestateshopfl.com, or give them a call at 954-268-9812. They're not just here for the sale, they're here for the journey. Reach out to them again at 954-268-9812. So, okay, he may not do enough to be kept past that deadline because they ain't going into the second apron for Josh Christopher or for Nassir Little or for any of these guys. Okay, they're just not going to do it. They're not going to do it for pretty much anybody. So it's possible he just doesn't show enough, and then this is just one of those podcasts we look back at and we're like, okay, this is a guy. They took a flyer on him. They took a look. It didn't really work out, and he's in Europe. Okay, after that, or something along those lines. But if he shows something, who do you think would be in jeopardy? If they haven't made a trade to pare down the roster by a number at that point, do you see anybody on a guaranteed contract to Thomas Bryant?
I don't know about that because they would have to eat Thomas Bryant's contract number at that point because I don't think he has a guarantee date at any point. So I don't see a world, and I'm trying to look now to double check to see if they have any non-guaranteed guys this season, but I don't think so. That's why I'm I think the most likely scenario, and not to shade him or say that he can't make it, but I think the most likely scenario at this point today is January 7th comes and he ends up just being cut off, and shout out to him, for trying to make it and getting this second chance. Like you mentioned, the market might not have been great for him, but he's got this chance now. And if it does work out, I think it gets to a point where, they've got some tough decisions to make. I'm not sure. I think you got to do some math, but they can't give him a two-way. So
Right.
it's not like you can just move one of those guys and transfer the spots. So I'm not sure what they do if they just really want to keep him.
And we're still looking at what they may do with two ways in terms of what they have right now, because Isaiah Stevens is on in Exhibit 10, and that's one of the things we're going to be watching in training camp, and probably gonna do an episode on this. I mean, should we do a just a straight out, flat out training camp battles episode? We should, right? Like this. I mean, right? Like who's competing with who for playing time? Like we just start pitting people against each other. We probably should do that, right? That's what we do for football. But Isaiah Stevens, he may push Drew Smith out of that spot, right? Like Drew Smith is still holding a two-way. I don't know if he's healthy or not. He's still
No,
holding
it's
a
true.
two-way.
I mean, these guys, it's undoubtedly a competition, and I think Stevens is the guy that everybody wanted to see. But yeah, like it's funny like seeing them in these pictures online on social media where like they're all hanging out with each other. Drew Smith, Isaiah Stevens, Zion Pullin. Like these guys are all competing directly with each other. Like they're all playing pretty much in the same position. So it's funny seeing that stuff, and I think Stevens might have a leg up there, but we see that the Heat have really liked Drew Smith. So I wouldn't get ahead of myself there.
Yeah, no, they do. Obviously, I mean, I feel like the end of this build is going to be Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Drew Smith, pretty much. No, I'm not really serious about that. Anyway, all right, so we're gonna do another episode. Maybe we'll do that. The training camp battles. Brady and I are gonna do an ep on the weaknesses of the 7 Eastern Conference contenders. We're trying to give you guys some hope. What are the things that could blow up the teams that are perceived to be in front of the Heat? So we'll go through Boston. It's going to be a little harder with that one. Philadelphia, New York. We already got one with them. Their starting center is not going to be available. We got Josh Hart telling people on Twitter that he's a 1 through 4, not a 5, even though he had a 17 rebound, no point game. Who else? Milwaukee. That's some definite ones for them. Orlando, Cleveland, Indiana. So we'll go through all of those teams. What are the potential weaknesses for those 7 teams? Because all we do sit here is talk about the Heat's weaknesses, which we'll probably do more of, but we'll also try to focus on some of the strengths. Anyway, thanks to Alex. Thanks to our sponsors, Real Estate Shop, 2 P's and an E, FL.com, and also Better Edge. Use the code 5RSN. I do mention Prize Picks on now. We got a couple codes for them. You can still use the code 5 as well, FIVE. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.